Hello everyone, today I'll be reviewing Midnight Cowboy. So Midnight Cowboy came out in 1969 and was directed by John Schlesinger and stars Jon Voight and Dustin Hoffman. So at the start of this film we see Jon Voight's character Joe Buck. He lives in Texas as a dishwasher and he decides that he doesn't want to do this anymore. So he goes off and he gets on a bus and he leaves for New York to become a hustler. And we get an excellent sequence at the start of this film when he's on the bus and the song Everybody's Talking by Harry Nilsson is playing in the background. And it's a really fantastic song which is played a few times throughout this film and is almost seen as the theme song of the film. And it's an excellent track, it really is, and it really sets the tone of the film about travelling to somewhere different and really finding yourself. So once Joe Buck gets to New York, he tries to become a hustler. He meets a woman, they have sex, and then later he expects some money for it, but she doesn't want to give him any money, so he essentially fails and he tries to pick up a few more women but keeps on failing all the time until eventually he comes across Dustin Hoffman's character, who is called Enrico Ratso Rizzo, or just Ratso really is his nickname throughout this film. And Ratso is a character who says he thinks he can help out Joe Buck and essentially be his manager in his quest to become a hustler. But it then turns out that perhaps actually Ratso isn't particularly useful after all. Now Dustin Hoffman in this film, he portrays the character of Ratso as being slightly crippled. So he has a bad leg, he can't walk properly throughout this film, so he's always limping all the time when he's walking down the streets. And we do get the impression that he is particularly poor and he doesn't seem to have a job, and he steals some food a few times and is living in this really slummish apartment. And yeah, it's very clear that he's living in quite filthy conditions, and Joe Buck obviously feels quite sorry for him, but at the same time he sort of wants to go out and do his own thing. But this film really does tend to focus on the relationship and the friendship between the characters of Joe Buck and Ratso. They become good friends, and essentially what happens is Joe wants to be a hustler. Ratso wants to help him, although isn't particularly useful, and Joe feels quite sorry for Ratso, so essentially has to end up choosing between going out and doing his own thing and also looking after Ratso, because Ratso gets quite ill quite a lot. There's one scene where he also falls down the stairs and he basically doesn't seem to have a very good life, and Joe feels sorry for him and Joe wants to help him. So we do get some really memorable sequences throughout this film. This film was actually rated X, and it was the first rated X film to win the Best Picture Oscar, because this film came out in the late 1960s, which was a time when lots of films were really pushing the boundaries of what was acceptable, because the Hays Code was starting to be lifted, which meant that there were more films which were pushing the boundaries of violence, sex, nudity, and bad language. In 1969, the same year that this film came out, we had films like The Wild Bunch and Bonnie and Clyde, which really pushed the boundaries of violence. Actually, come to think of it, Bonnie and Clyde came out in 1967, not 1969, but it was around the same time anyway. But this film, Midnight Cowboy, it isn't a particularly violent film, but it does show some sex and nudity which were quite unusual for its time and were really pushing the boundaries. This film does also contain some homosexuality in it, which again was quite unusual for the time. There has been some debate about whether Joe Buck and Ratso are supposed to be homosexuals. It's quite obvious to me that they're not homosexual, but their relationship is quite unusual because they do spend a lot of time together instead of spending time with women, which is perhaps what they would both like to be doing but are unable to do throughout this film. There was also a couple of homosexual encounters with Joe's character, but it's not necessarily because Joe wants to take part in these activities, it's just because he has to in order to make some money, because that's essentially what he is trying to do. and has found out that going to New York and becoming a hustler is not as easy as he thought it would be. This film involves lots of flashback sequences, so there'll be something happening in the film and then it will suddenly cut back to something which happened in Joe's life previously. And in some ways this works very well because it gives us more information about Joe's background, about what he went through as a child and what made him the man he is today. But I do think the use of flashbacks is used a bit too much in this film, and I do find it quite distracting from the rest of the film, and I didn't always feel as though it was necessary for his character development. One of the scenes I do really like though is with Dustin Hoffman's character Ratso. He has a sort of daydream-like sequence going on in his head where he is expecting and he is thinking about him and Joe becoming rich one day with this hustling business and having lots of money and living in Florida with the sunshine and being on the beach and being near this hotel and swimming pool and all having a good time. So he's essentially thinking, yes, we're going to make it, we're going to make lots of money, and we have this real light-hearted, funny music playing in the background. But that all turns out just to be a daydream because of what happens afterwards. So I really like that scene. And then we do also get this weird psychedelic type scene where they go to this party and there's all these Andy Warhol type people that are there. And that scene was quite interesting, but a little bit weird, I suppose. But this film in general is fairly unusual. So I can appreciate what Jon Schlesinger was trying to do here and trying to make something different for the new Hollywood audience which was taking place at the time. So I have to say Midnight Cowboy is an unusual movie, certainly a movie of its time, and it was released during a time when there were lots of these movies which were trying something different and being more experimental, which I can certainly appreciate. However, at the same time, I didn't fully enjoy this movie as much as I have other movies of this time, so I much prefer films like Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid and The Graduate. I found those movies much more enjoyable. This movie was just a little bit too dark for me. Not that I don't ever enjoy films which are dark, but this one was just a little bit depressing in places, I suppose, and not one I particularly enjoyed. But I do appreciate it as a film, so I am going to give it a rating of 8 out of 10 because it is definitely a very memorable film and very much a film of its era, and should definitely be watched if people want to watch a film from that era and understand about the new Hollywood era of movies. And also I must say Jon Voight and Dustin Hoffman both give excellent performances, and they are both great actors anyway, so that's to be expected. So there we go, so that is my review of Midnight Cowboy. So what do you guys think? Have you seen Midnight Cowboy? Do you like it? Do you dislike it? Please let me know down in the comments what your thoughts are. Anyway, thank you all very much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care.